All right, good morning, everybody. It's Tuesday morning's edition of Ask the Master Auto Technician. Whew, what a day. Yesterday, got to work on some cars that had some interesting problems. They really were. And some of the problems we saw were, well, where things weren't making contact. Where we could see we had wave patterns, but yet we weren't seeing that information on our scanner. And I'm sitting here going, okay, if we see wave patterns, if we have a scope pattern on the input and output sensors, but yet we're not seeing it being processed through the scanner, is there something wrong with the computer? Is there something wrong with the wiring? Is there something wrong? What's going on? So we knew the computer wasn't a fact. We knew the computer was brand new. There couldn't be a problem with the computer. It was verified, rechecked, double checked, everything. That was fine. That wasn't the problem. So then we had to go about this systematically and figure out, okay, so if we're having wave pattern readings that we can see on a scope, but yet those wave pattern readings aren't on the scanner, then why do we not have them? And that's where we started doing 4 years ago. I'm not changing subject. 4 years ago, back in the early 80s, had a test called the wiggle test. And that was back before we had bidirectional controls on scanners, and we didn't have data PIDs on it. We couldn't see what was working, what wasn't working. So Ford has said, okay, this is what you do. You go by each component and you wiggle it, twist it. Now, I'm not talking about jerking on it or ripping it apart, but gently move it, twist it, and see what's going on. So so that's what we ended up doing, and that is why we found the problem. We found the problem where a connector, over years, when it was at the factory, they put it together and they got it right where it touches, right where it made connection to the male and female. And then over a period of time, things kind of shrank, came apart, so there wasn't making a connection on the wiring harness. So what we ended up doing is we wiggled the wire, we saw it make connection, let go of it, it would lose the connection, wiggle it again, get the connection. I said, okay, we know the right area. So we took it apart, looked at it, examined it, saw there was no chafed wires, nothing where a rat had gotten a hold of and chewed anything up. Taped it all back together and put it together, and then not just screwed it together where it made contact, but screwed it further in so it made good contact. That's something now this car was a 2006, I believe. So we're talking about a vehicle that's 11, 12 years old. Never had a problem with this before. Never. And after, after these years, 12 to 13 years, now it develops a problem where things don't work. Well, that's where you have to have a shop that can have a scanner. Very important to have a scanner. Second thing that's very important is they have to have a scope. Too many shops out there, and I'm not trying to be, say I'm better than you. No. They do not use a scope. Now, I do not know why they don't use a scope. Maybe they've just not been trained. Maybe they're scared of it. I don't know. Maybe they tried to use it and it didn't work. But scopes are really easy to use these days. I mean, not like it used to be. I used to work on them back in the 70s and early 80s. I used to have analog scope. Boy, they were a pain in the butt to get adjusted just right. And sometimes you didn't know if you had it right or not. You had a wave pattern, but you weren't quite sure what you had. The analog. Well, the digital is not like that. So long as you have a signal and you have a ground and you can sit there and play with it, and you can figure out, how many milliseconds you want to have it, and, the duration that you want to have, and you can play with it and won't hurt a thing. And it won't cause any damage, and you can sit there and see what kind of patterns you have. But that's very, very important to have a scope where you can actually verify what the scanner sees. Yeah. See, because if your scope sees something and your scanner doesn't see something, then there's a gap. And that's what I see a lot of times on drivability complaints that customers can't get repaired. They'll take it to a shop. The shop says, okay, you have a code, XYZ code. They put that part in for XYZ. And then they still have the same problem. And I say, well, you really got to understand how the system works. Give you an example. We had a customer came in yesterday, a complaint on a Toyota Camry, 4-cylinder, OBD2, 2000 model, complaint of running lean, air fuel ratio, on bank 1, sensor 1. This is the 4-cylinder. You've got an air fuel ratio sensor in the front, and you've got a downstream oxygen sensor in the rear. I looked at it and I said, sir, here's what I can tell you. I plugged my scanner in. Yes, you have that code. You've gone to AutoZone. They've told you you have this code. That's great. They want to sell you a part. That's wonderful. But I'm going to tell you something. I can hear with my ears that you have an exhaust leak. If you've got an exhaust leak, Putting parts in there is not going to solve your problem as far as putting sensors in there. You need to fix the exhaust leak first, because that's what it's doing. That's what the air-fuel ratio sensor or the oxygen sensor is actually reading. It's reading oxygen. And between every beat of a 4-cylinder engine or an 8-cylinder engine or a 6-cylinder engine, you have a low pressure system that actually means you actually will have a chance to actually suck in oxygen out of the air into your exhaust system. And if your if your oxygen sensor downstream is reading lean, and your oxygen sensor upstream or air fuel ratio sensor is reading lean, there's a possibility that it's reading lean. And it could be running lean because of you don't have enough fuel. It could be. It could be running lean because you got a vacuum leak. Could be. But you can rule all those things out by testing with a scanner just sitting in the front seat of a car. You can actually see what's going on. You can actually go for a ride and see how much load you're putting on the engine. You want to make sure that your load goes above 85%. Now, some of you out there, you might want to write this down, so when you go to your technician and go for a test drive, and you ask him, well, will you go drive it? Make sure that when you and I drive together, you do the driving, I'll hold the scanner or whatever you want to do. Make sure you got a load of at least 85% when you accelerate. That's number one test. Number two, look at how many grams per second the mass airflow sensor is reading. If you've got a 2.4 liter engine, you should be running about about 2.4 grams per second. You shouldn't be reading 6 or 7 grams per second. If you do, you've got something wrong with the mass airflow sensor. So if it's a 4-cylinder engine, around 2, 3, whatever the liters are per engine, that's about what the grams per second should be. If it's a 5-liter engine, it should be around 5 grams per second. 6-liter, around 6 grams per second. 2.5-liter, around 2.5 grams per second. That's good rule of thumb that applies to any car out there, a Chevy, Ford, Chrysler, Honda, Toyota. It doesn't matter, all the same. So you've looked at your load, you've looked at your grams per second. And then you say, okay, what's going on? Then you look at your fuel trims while you're sitting there idling. They should be within plus or minus 10, a long term and short term. You add them together, you got a +5 and a +5 on the long term, and a short term you got a -10. You put that together, what have you got? You got a +5. So that's fine at idle. So that tells me there's no vacuum leak. You can see all that sitting still in the driveway. And that's what we do at James Auto Center. We can see all this information in just a few minutes, and then I can make a decision. How much time do I need to do actual pinpoint tests? Do I actually need to go in there and look at that fuel pump to make sure it's working correctly? Do I see any evidence that it may be starving for fuel? Do I see any evidence that we have a problem with running a vacuum leak or a mass airflow sensor that's dirty or not performing properly? These things you can tell, and any diagnostician, automotive diagnostician that does this for a living, can do the exact same thing I'm doing. And they do it sitting in the front seat of your car, driving the car with a scanner. Now, is that going to be free? Well, I'm going to tell you, free is a relative term. Free means, yes, they can tell you what's going on. Now, are they going to tell you and divulge, okay, you need this, 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 this? That's what they've worked all their years learning, honing their craft, their trade, knowing that I know I have to do this, I have to do this, but if I don't do this before I do that, then there's going to be a problem. So that's where, look, I know it's going to take an hour to diagnose this car correctly or somewhere in that general area and give the customer an explanation, put together a repair, a solution to the problem, and then put it together and get agreement, this is what it's going to take, and then fix it. That's what we do here. That's what I've been doing for the last 38 years at James Auto Center, is trying to take care of my customers like I would my own family. Because you, my customers out there, or watch this show or come into my shop, that's what's made my business successful. That's what I've been able to raise my kids. That's what I've been able to keep roof over my head and food on my table, is because I've been working on this craft long before computers came out. Before computers came out, I was working on them, going to school. When computers came out, I went, oh my Lord, what's this going to be? Well, I found out cars are a lot easier to work with computers that work correctly, and you know how they work, because you can find a lot more information with a computer than you can without one. It is. It's a computer. It stores all this information. Maybe worthless to you and me, but when you need it, and that car has it, and it's all at your fingertips if you know what to look for. So that's one of the things I'm saying about when your car comes in for a drivability problem or anything like that, whatever it is. The shop needs to be able to understand the PIDs, you know, the little, what each one means. What's the oxygen sensor supposed to be? What's the air-fuel ratio supposed to be? You know, if you don't know what the oxygen sensor does and the air-fuel ratio sensor, even though they look the same and you don't know how they work differently, then you really need to study it, because you can't fix something if you don't know what you're looking at. I mean, I'm serious. Yeah, people all the time say, well, how do you know how to do that? And I said, well, I've been doing it a very long time, and if I don't know how to do it, I stop and go read on how it works. Yeah, I get cars come in, I don't know how the air conditioning completely works, you know, a certain way. You know, maybe there's something in the compressor that's different than a normal compressor. I saw that the other day on a Volvo. I had to stop, read, figure out what the heck was going on. Saw what was going on, how it corrected it, what you did, how to verify what the problem was without doing anything invasive by looking at pressures. Went, okay, here's what's going on. I see the problem now. This is the corrective procedure to take care of it. You don't need to replace the compressor. You need to replace a valve in the compressor that's serviceable. Now, maybe $200 or $300 to replace this little valve. You know, but the point being is it's cheaper than buying a compressor. Yes, the compressor was at fault, but it was a part of the compressor that was, you know. So having a shop that you can talk to not only will save you hundreds, if not thousands of dollars over the lifetime of your car, it also gives you peace of mind that when you're getting ready to go out of town and you're getting ready to go visit family, you know you've had your car maintained and serviced at a reputable shop. They've been taking care of you over the years. You've had no problems in town with it. You know, and if you have had a problem with it, you've taken it, they've been able to take care of it. That's the advantage of having like a doctor you can trust, a lawyer you can trust, a minister you can trust and confide with, and having an auto technician. An auto technician you can call up and say, you know, he may not be able to come to you on the phone, but you can say, hey, I need to come up there and see what's going on with my car. Get the car, go for a ride, verify what's going on, and say, hey, yeah, you got a problem. It's not a big problem. It'll get you through, you know, till we get the part for it, or whatever the case may be. But I see so many people out there that want to micromanage the repairs that don't know what they're doing. Just like that guy on that Camry, he was determined that if all he needed to do was put a new part in there. And I was determined I wasn't going to touch the car unless we did it correctly, and that's to fix the exhaust leaks. So find a shop, find an owner of the shop or whoever you're dealing with that will fix the car correctly. If you know a lot about cars, fix the cars yourself. If you don't know a lot about cars, you might want to pay a professional who does this for a living. When someone comes in and tells me I'm running lean on the car and they want me to change parts because the people at the parts store said you need that part, then I look at the scanner down there and I realize that, hey, you know, I got two sensors reading extremely lean at idle and I got a major exhaust leak. What do you think I need to fix first? Change parts, it costs hundreds of dollars, or maybe fix an exhaust leak that may cost hundreds. I don't know. It may be the fact that, you know, it's got a bad gasket or cracked manifold. But if you don't fix the cause first and you're just treating a symptom, you're not going to fix cars. You need to fix the underlying cause of any problem, whether it's a fuel pump causing it to run lean, or an oxygen sensor is contaminated with silicon, or an exhaust leak. Whatever the problem is, you need to think outside the box. Too many people do not think outside the box. It costs them a lot of money and time, and costs them a lot of customers because they can't keep them because, well, they can't take care of their customers' needs. And that's what we try to do here at James Auto Center. And if you've got a comment, a question, want to be a part of the show, have a question about your drivability problem, you can pick up that phone, dial 850-763-0555. And if I can't come to the phone, we can set up a time for you to come by for a free test drive and consultation. All it takes is 15 minutes of your time, and we may save you hundreds, if not thousands of dollars. Talk to you in a few minutes. I don't know who's going to be calling, so give us a call, 850-763-0555. No one calls, I'll talk about something. We'll be right back.
If you want the best deal in town for tires, you need to call Baytown Tires at 873-8900.
Hanson and the guys at Baytown Tires take pride in serving Panama City for over 20 years. Baytown Tires on Highway 98 in St. Andrews. All service work backed by a nationwide warranty.
Water is too powerful to fight alone. Mr. Router Plumbing. Sink, shower, and toilet emergency drain services.
All right, welcome back to the show. I talked about, diagnostics and finding a shop you can trust earlier, and finding a shop that can go for a ride and see what your problem is before they start slamming parts into it, and be able to make a judgment call using a scanner. Well, that's very, very important. And the same thing holds true when it comes to charging systems. I see too many people out there throwing parts on, well, that really don't need parts. The biggest thing I see with customers on their charging systems that they do intentionally, not to hurt their system, but it does hurt the system, is put temporary battery cable ends on their vehicle. And when I say temporary battery cable ends, you're probably looking at me going, what's he talking about? It's those ends that you cut off, your cable, and you skin back the wire, and you put it on there, and you clamp them on. Some of them are red, some of them are black, some of them are painted, some of them aren't. I'm going to tell you, those are for temporary use only. That's to get you out of a jam and get you where you're going till you get it fixed correctly by replacing the entire cable, which is very expensive on some cars, $500 to $1,000 on some Fords I can think of out there, or for just a fraction, you can have a permanent battery cable put on that is soldered on. That's right, soldered on with heat shrink, just like it's supposed to be. That's what you're supposed to do. Too many people don't do that. And if you understood a little bit about resistance and DC volts, it makes it quite easy to understand why you don't want that on there. Okay, here's something I'm going to explain to you. For every connection you have on a system, you just got 0.2 of a volt drop. Every connection. You think I'm kidding you? It's a fact, Jack. It really is. I see it all the time. Every connection you have on a system, you'll get around 0.2 of a volt drop. So if your car batteries, if your charging system is only charging 12.2, just barely charging. Remember, an alternator charges 13.8 to 14.2, somewhere in that general area when the car is running. But say your alternator is only putting out 12.3 volts, just barely charging. Just barely charging. It's got bad diodes in it or whatever the case may be. And you'll sit there and go, well, I just don't understand, what's going on in my car, why I'm having such problems with my alternator, or having problems with my fuel pump, or having all these problems because people have too many connections, because at that battery they put temporary battery cable ends on the positive and negative. They've just added 0.4 of a volt drop to their charging system. 0.4. If your battery is supposed to have 12.65 in it and you just added 0.4 of resistance to it, voltage drop, you took away 0.4 of a volt, you now dropped it from 12.6 to 12.2. Just by putting battery cable ends on there. You don't need to be doing that. That makes that alternator work twice as hard. It makes the battery off gas harder. It actually generate more hydrogen, sulfuric acid, or hydrogen gas, I should say, from the sulfuric acid, which causes that green fuzzy stuff to get on those temporary battery cable ends you put on there. So you wonder, I just put these things on 6 months ago. Why do they look like a green chia pet growing on my? Well, that's because of the hydrogen sulfide gas, or I should say the hydrogen gas that's being produced from charging the battery. It meets with that unprotected metal on there, and voila, you get corrosion. This is what we do here to keep that from happening. First off, we remove your temporary battery cable in. We make sure the copper is clean and not corroded, because normally when we get to it, it's corroded, it's oxidized, it's got corrosion in it where the acid's worked its way back up in there because it's been exposed to the atmosphere. You've got copper, you've got galvanized steel, you've got galvanized nuts and bolts and piece of plate on there that's zinc and galvanized and zinc, and then you've got lead. You've got those three metals combined with air. And if you took any type of class, automotive shop class or anything, when you get to similar metals they put together, they create electricity on their own. Just dissimilar metals. That's just how it works. That's part of physics. And then you add electricity to the mixture. In addition to the electricity it's generating, you're going to get corrosion. You really, really are. That's how easy it is. So here's what I recommend. We pull that cable off, we clean the terminals off, we slide down heat shrink tube down the end of it that'll fit over the entire end. We take a permanent battery cable in and we put a pellet in it that's got flux in it and lead solder in it, and we heat it up to where that's a nice liquid, very, very hot liquid. We take the cable ends, we push it into that, and someone takes a bucket of water and cools it down rapidly, so that no one gets hurt, and it's on there good. We tug on it nice and good. We make sure it's all nice and tight on there. There's no connections. We blow the water, the moisture out. We put and then before we put the heat shrink down on top of it, we spray it with what I call magic stuff. It's a clear, lubricating grease. It goes on like water but gets sticky. And that gets in there to keep oxygen from getting to the copper, because we don't want oxygen getting to the copper causing corrosion. And that's what causes the corrosion, is oxidation from oxygen and copper and dissimilar metals and electricity. And so we keep that away. Then we put the heat shrink tape over it, shrink it down where it's nice and tight. So now we've got a double whammy on it to keep oxygen from getting to it, to keep it from corroding. Now we've got permanent battery cable in, just like the factory. We solve so many problems on drivability. We solve so many problems on starters failing, alternators failing, fuel pumps failing. All these things because people put these temporary battery cable ends on because they're sold to them at the parts store. Even the dealership put temporary battery cable ends on. That one, I can't figure that one out. You would think that they would actually go to a class and understand the amount of resistance that puts on there. Because you got the connection where you go on the battery, that's 0.2 of a volt right there if you just think about it. And then you got the connection right behind the battery on the connector right there. If it's not heat shrink soldered, there's 0.2 of a volt. You can actually have as much as a 0.5 volt or more just by putting battery cable ends that are temporary. And if you don't clean the paint out of them, where the copper lines and the paint, you're only using that little strap up there that doesn't have paint on it. So you're getting a voltage drop when you crank it. And that doesn't take long to burn a starter up. I have customers say, yeah, I've noticed my starter's been turning over a little slow. And I kind of look at, well, first off, let's get rid of those temporary battery cable ends and make sure your battery's good. We look at the battery. The battery is okay. There's nothing wrong with it. It's not great. It's not bad. So we clean the battery up, make sure it's fully charged, put permanent battery cable ends on there, test it again. And in most cases, the problem with cranking goes away. It turns over fast enough. I don't have a voltage drop. I've got a full 12 volts, if not more, going to that starter. Does exactly like it's supposed to do. But too many people do not understand that the more connections you add, remember, you're only dealing with a 12 to 14 volt system. We're not like we're dealing with 110 volts or 220 volts, where if you lose 2 or 3 volts, it's not a big deal. You lose 2 or 3 volts on a system that only has 12 to 14 volts, that's a big deal. You're losing more than 10%, 20% of the voltage. It's not going to work. Fuel pumps are going to die premature deaths. Alternators will die very quickly. I see too many people jumping cars off with dead batteries and then a week later come back to me and goes, hey, my battery light's on. I go, yeah, your alternator's not charging. How can that be? If my battery was dead last week, I jumped it off and everything seemed fine until today. Well, that's because you didn't charge your battery up after you jumped it off. Yeah, that was a temporary solution to get you out of a bind. You should have brought the car back home or took it to a garage, put a trickle charger on it, let it charge overnight at 10 amps. Next morning, everything had been fine. Now you're not putting a $700 alternator because you were proactive and did an all-night trickle charge at 10 amps. If you had done that, or taken it to a shop and said, hey, I had to jump my car off, charge my battery up, pay them $10, $15, whatever it takes to charge up the battery and check the charging system out. But too many people don't do that because they believe a generator, or an alternator can charge up their dead battery. Yes, it can. Not for very long. It will wipe it out. It's not. Remember, alternators are designed to maintain a fully charged battery. A generator, like we used to have years ago with no diodes in it, just a generator, will charge up a completely dead set of batteries, no problem whatsoever. That's its job. Alternator's job is not to do that, because see, an alternator will charge at low RPMs. A generator will not. At idle, a generator does not charge very well at all. You have to get it off idle, 1500, 2000 RPM, to generate enough voltage to charge up the batteries. Alternator's not that way. Once it fires up, once everything kicks on and it's activated, that thing starts charging at 75 to 80% of its maximum capacity. If it's a 100 amp alternator, it's charging 75 amps trying to charge it up. Now, it's doing its best to charge that battery up. If that battery is a stone cold dead battery, it's going to give 75% of its capacity as long as it possibly can to get that battery back up to 13.8 to 14.2. It doesn't take long of charging at wide open capacity before the diodes pop, brushes go, stator gets overheated, and you're buying a $700 to $1,000 alternator to be put on a car. I'm not trying to scare you. I'm just trying to tell you how to be proactive to keep from spending money you don't need to spend. When you have a problem, be proactive and get it looked at immediately. If you got a problem with your charging system, the battery went dead, find out why the battery went dead. Do you have a parasitic drain? Is something on that shouldn't be on? Did you leave the lights on? You know, people do that all the time, left the door open. There's no dishonor in calling someone up and say, hey, I need to charge my battery up. You know, if you got to jump it off, I understand. Jump the car off, let it sit there for a few minutes hooked up to the other car to try to get things back up to normal before you just pull those jumper cables off and spike that alternator. I'm telling you out there, if you do have a dead battery and you have to jump it off, let it stay connected to the other car for at least 10 to 15 minutes, at least. If you don't, you're going to damage your alternator because you're going to take the voltage from the other car to help get that battery built back up so that alternator is not working at 75% of its capacity, you know, too long to burn up the alternator. That's why I'm saying get that battery charged if it's gone dead. I don't care how, you know, and batteries more than 2 to 3 years old, get rid of them. Those people that don't do that, that seems to have some sort of a game that they're playing with themselves. My battery's 5 years old. You're living on borrowed time in the South if you have a battery more than 2 to 3 years old. It's not a matter of if they're going to fail. It's a matter of when they're going to fail. And a lot of times it happens either on the first cold snap. We'll get a cold snap down here where the temperature drops down to 35, 40 degrees. Boom. I'll sell 10 batteries in one day. Or it'll happen in the summertime when we get these days where endless, you know, day after day after day after day, we got, you know, 95-degree weather and, you know, hot and dry. We see those happen too. During the summertime, we sell a lot of batteries. But normally in the summertime, we sell a lot of batteries. We sell a lot of other things that go along with it, like radiators and batteries and alternators, because people put off doing the maintenance on them. And now, after, you know, summer's here and the heat's here, and you know, that preventive maintenance, I keep telling them fluids are so much cheaper than metal parts. Get those fluids changed. Do the preventive maintenance on it. Keep the car working like it's supposed to work. You're going to spend about $1,000 a year maintaining a car. So put that money back. I tell people that in driver's education class, children all the time. An average car will spend $1,500 to $2,000 a year to maintain one that's more than 5 years old. That's tires, batteries, you know, light bulbs, you know, oil changes. Those things, you know, are part of keeping a car on the road dependably. Put back money every month, at least $100 a month for your car account. People that do that normally have extra money at the end of the year in that account. I'm not saying they all do. I had a gentleman come in yesterday. He's going to be a little upset. He just bought a car, didn't get it checked out, and now gets to put a $4,000 transmission in it. Yike. And the reason it went bad was because, not that he bought it bad, is he bought it with low on transmission fluid and drove it for 2 weeks, 2 quarts low on transmission fluid. Burn up the transmission because it wasn't looked at by a pro. I'm not trying to be mean. I'm just trying to say, if you're going to buy a car, get it looked at by a professional before you sign the line. Maybe nothing wrong with it.
Part of what I'd like to let you know is what we do and how we work our system. Basically, we've got about 700 stocking dealers scattered around the 15 counties here in the Big Bend area of the state. I run a fleet of trucks, vans, and what we call hotshot vehicles to deliver to our dealers quickly so they can help service you as fast and efficiently as they can. Provide timely and efficient service, and we're there to take care of our dealers, who in turn can take care of their customers.